There is a question that China's intelligence apparatus has been asking for the past 36 hours that no Western outlet has yet framed correctly. And the answer to that question is more frightening for Beijing than anything that has happened to Iran. The question is this: we gave them everything. We gave them real-time aircraft tracking data. We gave them anti-stealth radar systems. We gave them the specific flight paths of every Israeli F-35 that took off from Tel Aviv. We watched those aircraft cross Iraq in real time and transmitted their position, speed, and altitude to Iranian military commanders. The flight time from Tel Aviv to Tehran is 2.5 hours. We gave Iran 2.5 hours of warning. And Khamenei still died in his compound on a Saturday morning with 40 of his most senior commanders sitting next to him. So who stopped that warning from reaching him? China's ambassador, Fu Kong, called the U.S.-Israeli strikes brazen, condemning the threat of force and calling for respect for Iran's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity. He said it was shocking that the U.S. and Israeli attacks came in the middle of diplomatic negotiations. Shocking. China's ambassador to the United Nations used that exact word on the floor of the Security Council this morning, and it is not diplomatic language. It is genuine bewilderment. Beijing provided Iran with anti-stealth radar that detected F-35s. Beijing provided real-time satellite intelligence. Beijing transmitted aircraft tracking data in real time as Israeli jets crossed Iraq. And none of it saved Khamenei because the intelligence China gave Iran reached the people who were supposed to act on it. And someone in that chain decided not to act on it, or decided to ensure that Khamenei would still be sitting in that compound when the Israeli F-35s arrived 2.5 hours after Beijing first saw them take off. President Vladimir Putin described Khamenei's killing as a cynical murder that violated all standards of human morality and international law. Putin added that in Russia, Khamenei will be remembered as an outstanding statesman who made a huge personal contribution to the development of friendly Russian-Iranian relations and brought them to the level of a comprehensive strategic partnership. Beijing said it strongly condemns the killing, cynical murder, strong condemnation. Those are the words of governments that are publicly outraged and privately asking the same question China is asking. Russia gave Iran the Verba manpads. Russia gave Iran the technology that kept the IRGC's missile systems functional despite American jamming. Russia leaked America's complete war plan to Tehran. And despite all of that, despite every intelligence advantage, every weapon system, every technological upgrade that both Russia and China spent 8 months delivering, Khamenei is dead. 40 senior commanders died in 2 locations in 1 minute, and the Israeli jets that killed them had been tracked by Chinese radar for 2.5 hours before the first bomb fell. Russia and China will likely refrain from offering Tehran meaningful military aids beyond rhetorical support. Refrain from meaningful military aid. That assessment from CNBC's geopolitical analysts this morning is the correct description of where both Moscow and Beijing stand as of right now. Not because they do not care about Iran, not because they have abandoned their strategic partnership, but because they are sitting in intelligence review meetings this morning asking one question that neither can answer with certainty. If the person who brought Khamenei out of his bunker and into that compound knew what was coming, and someone clearly did, then how deep does the penetration go? Who else inside Iran's military and intelligence structures is working for the other side? Who else in the chain that received China's real-time F-35 tracking data decided that information should go no further? Until Beijing and Moscow can answer that question, every piece of intelligence they share with Iran's new leadership is potentially intelligence they are sharing with the CIA. Stay with me because the 2 countries that built Iran's defensive architecture are now conducting emergency reviews of every system they gave Iran, not to upgrade it, but to determine whether it was compromised from inside before the first bomb fell. The source document for today's video raises a parallel that has appeared in every major Israeli intelligence success of the past decade, and understanding the pattern makes the China-Russia silence make complete operational sense. In each case, Soleimani in Baghdad, Nasrallah in Beirut, Haniyeh in Tehran, and now Khamenei in his own compound, the Israeli and American operation succeeded not because their surveillance technology was superior to Iran's security protocols, but because someone who knew the target's location, his schedule, or meeting details, chose to transmit that information at the critical moment. In each case, the operation required an insider. In each case, the insider was sufficiently senior to have genuine access to the target. And in each case, Iran's security establishment spent the subsequent weeks unable to determine definitively who had betrayed them, because the betrayer was embedded too deeply in the institution. Beijing says the killing of Iran's supreme leader is a grave violation of Iran's sovereignty and security. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian on Sunday described the supreme leader's killing as an open declaration of war against Muslims, particularly the Shia. This tragic event is the greatest trial facing the Islamic world today, he said. A grave violation, an open declaration of war against Muslims. Pezeshkian and Xi are describing the same event and arriving at completely different strategic conclusions about what it means. For Pezeshkian, who is now governing Iran under continuous bombardment with a three-person constitutional council, sharing his authority, the event means mobilization, mourning, revenge, and the continuation of the IRGC's sixth wave attacks against 27 American bases. For Xi, the event means something more operationally alarming. An ally that absorbed every intelligence and military advantage China could provide, and still lost its supreme leader in a daytime strike on a location where 40 senior commanders had been assembled. A basic operational security failure that no amount of Chinese radar technology or Russian missile systems could prevent. Iran is now on death ground amid existential threat from U.S. attacks, and could go big in retaliation. Former NATO commander warns U.S. history in that area of the world is not good with this. Top diplomat on Middle Eastern regime change as a losing game. Death ground. That term from Sun Tzu's Art of War, the Chinese military text that every officer in the People's Liberation Army studies, means the ground on which a force fights when retreat is impossible, and destruction is the only alternative to total commitment. A force on death ground fights with a ferocity that cannot be sustained, but cannot be predicted. It is the most dangerous opponent in any engagement, because it has nothing left to calculate about cost. It has already accepted total cost, and its only remaining variable is how much damage it can inflict before it ceases to function. China's silence is partly the silence of a country that built an ally's defenses and watched them fail. But it is also the silence of a country that is watching that ally on death ground and calculating whether the situation still serves Chinese strategic interests, or whether Iran's total commitment to revenge is consuming assets China built and needs. Russia's UN envoy strongly condemned the latest military attacks on Iran, calling them another unprovoked act of armed aggression. Vasily Nebenzia said, "The U.S. and Israeli military operation has been a betrayal of diplomacy. A betrayal of diplomacy." Russia's UN ambassador chose that specific phrase on the Security Council floor this morning. Not military aggression, not an act of war, but a betrayal of diplomacy. That framing is deliberate. Russia has spent 3 years watching its own diplomatic communications and military planning appear in Western press reports with suspicious regularity. Putin's dismissal of senior military commanders, his purge of FSB officers, his increasingly restricted inner circle, all of it reflects the same institutional paranoia that China is now experiencing as it reviews every intelligence channel it opened with Iran over the past 8 months. The question Moscow is asking today is the same question Beijing is asking. If the people we armed, informed, and equipped could be penetrated so completely that 40 commanders could be killed in 1 minute, what does that tell us about our own security? 3 American service members were killed, and 5 wounded in Iran's retaliatory operations against American bases. CENTCOM confirmed this morning, 3 Americans dead. That number, confirmed by the American military itself after 36 hours of claiming no casualties, changes the domestic political calculation in Washington in ways that Trump's Truth Social posts cannot reverse. 3 American soldiers are dead in a war that Trump launched without a congressional authorization for the use of military force. Based on an ICBM claim that his own intelligence officials told Reuters was unsupported against a country that was in active diplomatic negotiations with American envoys as recently as Thursday. Trump said something in an interview with The Atlantic this morning that is the most strategically significant statement he has made since the 2:30 a.m. Truth Social video that started this war. And it contradicts everything the operation was designed to demonstrate. Trump says he will be talking to Iranian leaders, but is vague on the timing and notes that much of the country's leadership is dead amid U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran. They want to talk, and I have agreed to talk, so I will be talking to them. They should have done it sooner, Trump is quoted as saying by The Atlantic. They should have given what was very practical and easy to do sooner. They waited too long. Asked when talks might take place, Trump says, "I can't tell you. They want to talk. I have agreed to talk. I cannot tell you when." That sequence published by The Atlantic on Sunday morning while Iranian missiles were still landing in Bahrain and Kuwait and Tel Aviv describes a president who launched the largest American military operation in 23 years and is now 36 hours later agreeing to talk to the government he was bombing. The 5 Geneva demands that were structurally impossible for Iran to accept. The demands that an Iranian official told journalists were designed to be rejected, apparently remain negotiable. The talks that Trump's own advisors told Axios had a 90% chance of producing kinetic action have now been replaced by an agreement to talk to the people who just struck 27 American bases and mine the Strait of Hormuz. This is what China and Russia are watching from the silence of their emergency review meetings. Not a decisive American victory that reshapes the Middle East. Not a regime change operation that produced the phone call Trump joked about on Saturday night. A bombing campaign that killed 40 Iranian commanders in 1 minute, killed the Supreme Leader, killed his daughter and grandson, and produced an agreement to talk to the surviving government on a timeline that Trump cannot specify. Perhaps cautious about upsetting already strained relations with Trump, many nations abstained from commenting directly or pointedly on the joint strikes, but condemned Tehran's retaliation. Similarly to Europeans, governments across the Middle East condemned Iran's strikes on Arab neighbors while staying silent on the U.S. and Israeli military action, silent on the American action. That diplomatic formulation, condemnation of Iran's retaliation without condemnation of the strikes that produced. It is the public face of every Gulf government's private calculation this morning. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, the UAE, Jordan, governments whose territory was struck by Iranian missiles because American jets took off from their soil, are condemning Iran's retaliation while staying silent about the American operation. That silence is not support. It is the silence of governments that cannot publicly oppose their security guarantor, while privately concluding that their security guarantor's operation produced exactly the outcome they spent weeks trying to prevent. The GCC foreign ministers are convening an emergency video conference today, not to coordinate support for Operation Epic Fury, but to determine what their collective position is on a conflict that has put their cities, their ports, their airports, and their economies in the crossfire of a war they were never consulted about. The same governments that prepositioned emergency oil supplies 3 weeks ago because they knew the strike was coming and wanted to minimize economic damage are now watching Jebel Ali port burn. Kuwait's airport terminal disabled, Qatar's early warning radar destroyed, and Bahrain's Fifth Fleet headquarters struck, and none of their Patriot batteries, none of their THAAD systems, none of the American defense architecture they paid hundreds of billions of dollars to acquire and maintain, stopped a single Iranian wave. Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, 86, was killed in a joint American-Israeli operation targeting Iran on Saturday. Iran's state media has confirmed the Iranian government has announced 40 days of mourning. The country's supreme leader was killed following an attack launched by the U.S. and Israel on Saturday against Iran as part of a major military campaign intended to topple the Islamic regime. 40 days of mourning, 7 days of public holiday, a 3-person constitutional council governing under continuous bombardment. A new IRGC commander appointed within 24 hours. 6 waves of retaliation against 27 American bases. The Fach-2 hypersonic missile used in combat for the first time. The Skylight tanker attacked in the strait with Iranian crew on board. 150 ships stalled outside a conditionally closed waterway, and Trump agreeing to talk to the government he is currently bombing on a timeline he cannot specify for terms he has not described, through channels that do not yet exist. China and Russia are silent because they are doing the same calculation that every strategic actor on Earth is doing this Sunday morning on March 1st, 2026. Was Khamenei's death the beginning of Iran's collapse or the beginning of something that has no historical precedent and no predictable endpoint? The answer to that question will not be found in any missile trajectory, any stock market reaction, or any presidential Truth Social post. It will be found in what Iran's streets do over the next 40 days of mourning. Whether they produce the regime change that Trump's operation was designed to trigger, or whether they harden into the kind of resistance that turns a military operation into a generation-long conflict, China is watching those streets. Russia is watching those streets. And the inside source who gave CIA the meeting location, whoever they are, wherever they are right now, is also watching those streets, waiting to find out whether the most consequential betrayal in the history of the Islamic Republic produced the outcome it was designed to produce. Share this video to every contact you have right now. China gave Iran 2.5 hours of warning and Khamenei still died. Russia is calling it a betrayal of diplomacy. 3 American soldiers are confirmed dead. Trump is agreeing to talk to the government he is bombing, and China and Russia are silent. Not because they do not care, but because they are asking a question neither can yet answer. Who stopped their warning from reaching Khamenei? Hi, I am Marcus. See you in next video.